When the opposing client decided to forego a real lawyer, how badly did they blow their case? Story 1. The first case I ever tried was a speeding case against a pro se guy who took the stand and accidentally confessed to it. He also had a video which he tried to lay the foundation for 30 minutes before giving up. I saw a guy who had a couple of the DUIs in his past take a stab at it. He sat in on so much court and saw way more trials than I had before my first jury trial. But there really isn't a replacement for some of the stuff they teach in law school. He lost and was clearly floundering at points despite having a well-polished open. I also saw a pro se one time put up nothing. No open, no evidence, no real crosses or close and win. Story 2. This American Life did an episode on self-representation. One of the people won by convincing a jury he was too incompetent to have committed the crime he was accused of. He was probably pretty smart, even if incompetent in other areas. It takes courage to go self-representation. Story 3. I interned with the ability to have all the rights of a municipal prosecutor for my 2L summer internship. Most people represented themselves because it was small stuff like disorderly conduct or speeding tickets. No big deal. My favorites were the ones who, when making mitigating statements to try to get the judge to lower their fines, would mention that I was their lawyer. Yeah, no, I was actually the polar opposite of your lawyer. Story 4. While I was studying law, I was observing at a local magistrate court. This guy who was representing himself turned to the other party and opened with, "So, we meet again." The other guy was his next door neighbor. It was a hedge dispute. The judge postponed the case on the spot and ordered him to come back after he got a legal aid lawyer. Story 5. My son's mother was a chronic drug abuser and alcoholic. After seeing an empty beer can in her back seat when picking my son up from her one-day joint physical custody, I decided to ask a few questions. My son was 12 at the time, and though I know it's considered poor form to ask your child about the habits of the other parent, I wanted to know about her drinking habits with him being around. It turned out she would regularly drink and drive. When court came around, she thought she had me right where she wanted me. She delivered the summons to my lawyer herself, which nullifies the summons because it has to be delivered by a third party. During discovery, we requested her cell phone records, Facebook password, smartphone records, Think pictures, IM, etc. Although it's slightly embarrassing to admit how much I enjoyed watching her squirm, after she asked a line of questioning, it was great to have my lawyer tell the judge she had no questions to ask my girlfriend. You could see the shock and horror on her face at the instant realization that she did so poorly herself that the lawyer didn't need to ask anything. Bonus moment. My son's mother asked if I was the one that called social services on her 6 times. My response was genuine. From the stand, I shouted, "Jesus Christ." 6 times. I only knew about twice, but no, I've never called them. I know 2 people called them on her, but I never did. While she has a drug or alcohol problem, she is incapable of caring for a child. And if drink driving, even more so. Story 6. In family law, it happens so often that the court is a bit more forgiving, overlooking some of the stricter rules of evidence and allowing opposing parties to speak freely and explain points raised by the other side, even though it isn't their turn. This being said, we are always getting shittily written letters directly from the other side. In law, if you're presented by a lawyer, you can't directly communicate with the other side. It has to be through your lawyer. Obviously, if you represent yourself, you communicate directly. Not that this law stops tards in family law, represented or not, calling us directly to abusing, taunt us, which serves nothing but to cause us to shake our heads at the idiots and then call their lawyers to complain, which hurts their case and can lead to sanctions being placed. Anyhow, so letters from people directly always misspelled and cringy. I find if it's a guy, they just write from the heart and lay out what they want or are after, often pretty defeated. If it's a woman, they regurgitate every bit of shitty advice from the internet and mothers groups, leading to total diarrhea on a page with legal buzzwords thrown about without the right meaning or context. Everything is in Charlie-esque, bird law, lawyeress, here forthwith, and unto we the undersigned verily plead that you cease intercourse post haste. Through reading, you can practically see the cake-eating grin on their faces when they sent it, thinking they showed us and beat us at our own game. They also tend to copy our letters verbatim with structure and layout, just with the roles reversed. You have to call them and try to explain to them how they are totally wrong and none of this makes sense, which never goes down well, as not only are they extremely hostile, they think we're just trying to screw them and lie. This transfers to the courtroom. Or they're not on movie tropes, are they? The walking around, the aggressive, attacking questions, not to mention the sexy streetwalker approximation of formal court dress. They use shit evidence like text messages they made themselves, terribly photoshopped printouts of Facebook conversations and printouts from websites of law summaries and forums, discussions that prove their point, and they yell out shit. It's all very embarrassing. Even lawyers don't represent themselves, even when they know what they are doing. Get representation, and even if you do represent yourself, don't pretend to know what you're doing. Story 7. Backstory. One of my clients sends a couple of urgent care clinics, the place you go on a Sunday because you're throwing up and can't get into your doctor's office. She hires a doctor who decided that schedules don't apply to him and that he'd really rather work in the clinic where the white patients are, instead of the one that he's supposed to be working in. So he doesn't show up a few times. The last time is the time he gets fired. Let me stress, this guy is a doctor. He files for unemployment and gets denied. So he finds it, and we have to go in for a hearing. Unemployment hearings are before administrative law judges and usually take about an hour each. He shows up on his own. He did a few things to blow his case, in no particular order. He was hostile. Very, very hostile. I kept my turn even and didn't get rattled, no matter what he said. I kept my client calm also. And a couple of times I had her keep her mouth shut to let him keep talking to lose the case. He was hostile to me, hostile to the judge, more on that later, and hostile to my client. He was off topic. He got fired for not showing up. He tried to make this a much bigger case about my client's business practices. He claimed that the nurses wouldn't talk to him because he had pissed all of them off, but that was irrelevant. One thing that I have been told before, as you never object too much to a pro se. It got so bad that the ALJ was looking at me, begging me to object. He was rude to the ALJ. Don't do this. He tried to do something. I can't remember what it was at this point, and I objected. He objected to my objection. The judge said that I can object and she'll listen to why I objected, and also to his counter argument. He announced that she wasn't being fair. His cell phone went off twice. The first time may have been an accident, but then the ALJ asked both parties, both of who are doctors, to turn off their phones or put them on vibrate. My clients never went off. It went off twice, 5 hours later, as we were leaving, finally, and the record is off. He keeps trying to talk to the ALJ. He has completely ruined her schedule for the day, and she wants no part of him at this point. I leave and she has to kick him out as it is improper for her to keep talking to him. She turned the record back on to make sure it was recorded. Now, here's a bonus story on the other end, because I love it. A restaurant manager fires a gay employee, and a gay employee files for unemployment. He alleges that he was fired because he is gay and that the manager used many gay slurs. I represented neither party in this matter. The manager goes to the unemployment hearing and states that A, he did make gay slurs against and about the employee, and B, he did fire the employee. But C, he did not fire the employee for being gay, and he lists several other gay employees that he has neither fired nor shot gay slurs at. Instead, he fired the employee because the manager thought the employee was an asshole. The manager won. Employee was represented by counsel. Okay, a lot of info here, but sounds like this doc is just not psychologically stable. He should not be seeing patients until he is mentally well. Story 8. I'm a cop and I sometimes get cross-examined by people acting as their own attorney in municipal court. I once arrested this guy for being drunk in public to the point of being a danger to himself, and he decided to fight it. The city attorney questioned me and asked if I recognized the accused. I said I did, and pointed out the guy that was sitting in the defendant's chair. I will call him Mr. Smith. We went through my testimony for the city about what I saw and so on. Then it became time for Mr. Smith to question me. He brought up the fact that I said I recognized him from that night, which was about 6 months ago. I said yes. Mr. Smith. So you say you recognized me from that night? Me. Yes, Mr. Smith, is there anything different about me from that night? Me. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Smith. So you are saying that I look exactly the same as that night? Is that what you were saying here in court under oath? Me. Well, you aren't drunk right now. You're wearing a shirt now and you don't look like you have urinated on yourself. Mr. Smith. No further questions. He ended up stating in his closing arguments that while he doesn't dispute that he is, in fact, Mr. Smith, he thinks I don't remember the case because he had a car wreck a few days after the arrest and now has a scar on his face that I didn't notice. Since I didn't notice that, I can't be telling the truth about the incident. Guilty. Story 9. Not a lawyer, but I've had some wins and losses. Managed to successfully defend myself against speeding, but unfortunately lost against not filing the paperwork, which ironically has a larger penalty than the actual speeding offense. We'll call this one a tactical loss. Unfortunately, I realized after the hearing that I could have actually come out of this with at least a financial win. By adopting an alternative argument about costs, I had some financial difficulties about 10 years ago. Opposite side, filed bankruptcy proceedings against me for about $200,000. I proved that they couldn't get their money due to a UK House of Lords decision and forced them to settle for $40,000, converted from UK amounts. Even better, the $40,000 was to be paid over 6 years interest-free. Judge who signed off the deal said he was astounded by what I'd managed to pull off. At the same time, I nearly lost my house due to the difficulty of making the mortgage payments. Successfully prevented 3 separate attempts at repossession, so wins here too. This was by showing there was a reasonable prospect I could pay back the arrears, which I did later. If they can lawfully do so, UK judges will bend over backwards to protect the little guy if you show you're trying to be reasonable and not a complete ass. You are smart and know how to work with people to get the desired results. You did your homework and won. Story 10. My father was an ADA, Assistant District Attorney. He once prosecuted a DUI case where the defendant was acting as his own counsel. His main difference was, since he was a chronic alcoholic, his baseline BAC, blood alcohol content, was already at least 0.5 all the time. So that needed to be subtracted from whatever the breathalyzer had read. Needless to say, he lost the case. Story 11. For a story regarding a pro se defendant, I was representing a client in a criminal case where she was charged with not sending her kid to school. So some case study referenced this one case from about 20 years earlier. That case was the case to go for with anyone charged with not sending that kid to school. Anyway, the more I read the case, the more familiar it all sounded. The father represented himself, pros, at trial and lost. He files a pros appeal, and it gets reversed. The case was styled something like State versus. Division kept referring to the child that didn't go to school as DD. I put the timeline together and realized this kid was in my class in grade school. I knew him. He never attended school. The appellate decision wrote about the kid having health problems and constant nosebleeds. All sorts of things, but he didn't have any of that. He always attended the first day of Halloween, Christmas, and the last day of school. Those were the days treats and candy were handed out. Any other day, he was gone. And this went on for years. But in the 6th grade, this kid was the guy to go to a few needed bike parts. I stopped by his house after school one day looking for some tube forks or something. He opens the door to his garage. Wall-to-wall bikes. There must have been over 100. His deal was that all day long he would just go to school and steal bikes off the rack. I think he eventually dropped out in the 8th grade, and I'm not sure how he even made it that far. Except that his parents seemed very litigious, so maybe the schools didn't want to get on their bad side. Story 12. Not a lawyer, but a rental property manager who goes to court often for work. We don't end up in full-blown civil trials that often, but when we do, it's usually against the defendant who is trying to represent themselves. The last 2 trials ended up with the judge giving the defendants 15-minute recesses so they could stop sobbing uncontrollably. Needless to say, those cases are blown in comical fashion. Don't bother representing yourself unless you know what you're doing. You won't be fooling anyone unless you know your stuff. Story 13. Everyone here has a story about how bad they fail. I figure I should give a story of one that hasn't. My ex took a landlord to court. Her landlord was awful. She would come in for inspections without actually booking or notifying my ex. She was not cleaning or paying to have the black mold cleaned and removed and basically just broke every rule. So my ex took her to court when her landlord tried to take her damage deposit for the removal of the mold, as well as a pipe that burst, which she routinely told her landlord was an issue and could happen. So yeah, you can win, but just be smart about it. Save everything that might be useful. She had every email about the stuff saved, every call recorded. She had dated pictures of all the stuff she sent her landlord about the pipes and mold, and in the end, she won. Story 14. Halfway through an unfair dismissal case, the employee apparently accepted that his dismissal was fair. For the first time in my career, I was speechless for about a minute. I thought carefully about what he said and what it meant. Should I rest my case on the spot like in a courtroom drama? I'd always wanted to do that, and this could be my only chance. What he had actually said was, I would have fired me too in those circumstances. I figured that technically he had some wriggle room there. After all, he hadn't said that his hypothetical self-dismissal would have been fair. So I pretended like it was a glitch in the matrix and carried on. Story 15. I have 3 times now in the last 30 years done legal matters without or with limited lawyers. I was in an explosion. I'm the guy wearing a red tie where I lost a bunch of stuff I was carrying. I negotiated a significant settlement. My girlfriend, who was also there and got minorly injured, got cold feet and went to a consultation with a lawyer at the last minute who told her that he couldn't get anything out of the company and it wasn't worth doing. We got $9,000 out of it. My band went after Columbia Records for trademark violation. We went most of the way and then got a copyright lawyer at the end. Net result? The other band changed their name. Total cost to us, less than $1,000. I was being evicted by my landlord because roommate was suing him. Same deal. I did most of the stuff till the end and then got a lawyer when we went to court. My landlord got savage. I got $10,000 in free rent and paid $450 in legal fees, though the other lawsuit paid for some additional fees. The lawyer told me I could have delayed leaving for probably a year if I wanted to, but I felt this was a good time to leave. Take away, learn the material, negotiate and defend yourself, but also know when you need to call a lawyer and don't hesitate to do that. Remember, all the good research you do on your own is research you don't have to pay some lawyers per reticle to do again. Good example of someone who did all his research and defended himself successfully. Yes, lawyers can cost you more than any settlement is worth. Click on one of the videos on the screen now, or Karen will sue you.